Hello, everybody, and welcome to another film flashback coming to you live on the Information Superhighway. Today it's Matthew as usual and Nick as usual, and joined once again by Matthew Hudacs because we decided that this time we would go back and watch 1996's The Cable Guy.
Yeah.
Cable Guy!
For Stephen Kovacs, the price of cable just went up.
We're not friends. I don't even know you. Well, let's fix that.
A friend who will not be ignored.
I gave you free cable. The guy is a sociopath. He shows up wherever I go. He won't leave me alone.
Suspicious, isn't it?
You're all being fooled by him. He's a lunatic and he's a felon. Don't mess with me.
The Cable Guy.
Okay, I'm going.
Cable Guy. So 1996. This is Ben Stiller directed by, starring, I guess you can call him the inimitable Jim Carrey. This is in peak Jim Carrey right here in the 90s. And the whole movie is this really thrilling Jim Carrey, Matthew Broderick kind of story that rides between genres, where it's definitely a comedy, but it's so creepy that it's like, it's one of the creepier comedies you're ever going to come across. And Matthew Broderick's playing straight man to Jim Carrey, who is playing a character that is basically turns into a stalker and tries to take over his life. That's a good pitch. If you sell me that pitch, I buy it every time. This movie didn't get, I don't think it was nearly as successful as some of the other real big Jim Carrey hits, but it made some money, and I think that we remember it fondly. Do you guys remember when you first saw The Cable Guy?
Yeah, I actually can't remember if I saw it in theaters or not. Does this have an R rating? I forgot to look at that.
It's PG-13.
PG-13? I don't think, I definitely owned the tape, and this was, growing up, one of my favorite Jim Carrey movies, period. Like, you're right, he is a character, and I found it so memorable. As soon as I started it, just, to me, it's just almost as quotable as Dumb and Dumber. I could have told you verbatim almost some of the stuff that comes up. Even like the throwaway lines I knew, I would remember. Must have been some kind of Asian gang or something. We used to say it back and forth.
I don't know what language he was speaking, but definitely Asian. And he's all embarrassed sitting there as he's hearing it played back.
No, this is definitely, I like it because this is a Jim Carrey that we hadn't seen yet. Because it was coming off of Dumb and Dumber and Mask and Ace Ventura 2. And he's just kind of this like goofy physical comedy. This is dark comedy. This is not like jovial kind of fun. This is the like awkward moment dark comedy that I think really shines the light in Jim Carrey's repertoire of what he does as far as comedies go, because up to this you'd only see him in like Once Bitten or Earth Girls Are Easy or in Living Color, but this is something that stands out as something completely different.
Yeah, I guess that's one way. I mean, I say the movie definitely has a different tone than The Mask or Ace Ventura, but he is still carrying the ball by being over the top spaghetti physical comedian with like a funny way of talking. Like,
I don't know. They really toned back. Now, I give this movie credit to Ben Stiller, which I'm sure we were all remember where we were when we found out that Ben Stiller directed this. And I was in the middle of watching Dodgeball. He directed Cable Guy? And then went back and watched it and loved it. And I think it's a testament to what Ben Stiller does as a director, comedically, but also in the sense of he really does like strain down Jim Carrey's physical comedy and he does it more with the reactionary comedy, with the situation of it, of like, he just wants a friend. So do everything in your power to get a friend.
I actually think so. Not to discredit Ben Stiller by any means, but so this movie was written by a guy named Lou Holtz Jr. Lou Holtz Jr. was a prosecutor in L.A. Saw a cable guy coming out of an apartment building late at night and thought, "Wonder what this guy's doing." And he comes up with the cable guy. And so this was a hot script, right? It ended up selling for $1 million, which that's a lot for a script even now. Like, that's an incredible amount.
Yeah.
And so the original iteration of this script was a buddy comedy. And I don't know if you guys have heard this or people or listeners, but the original guy they wanted to play the cable guy in this was Chris Farley. So they came to Chris Farley with this script and offered him $3 million to do the movie. And Chris Farley had to decide between doing a little movie coming off Tommy Boy. So this would have been the most he ever made. So they said, "Hey, we want you to play this cable guy." Yeah. And for significantly less money, Chris Farley took Black Sheep because he wanted to work with David Spade again and make essentially what they referred to as Tommy Boy 2. So what I was coming back to, the Ben Stiller obviously did a great job with this, and I think obviously just being able to corral that many personalities is always a job upon itself. But Judd Apatow is not listed. There was a big arbitration with the Writers Guild with Judd Apatow. He's listed as a producer on this, but the main elements of the buddy stuff are still in there. But all the dark stuff you see, that's all Judd Apatow. The dialogue is Judd Apatow, a lot of that. And so without the script that you have, the script that's very dark, I don't think this movie, we have a buddy comedy still. And so I think a lot of credit goes to Judd Apatow in this.
That'd be very interesting to know more about the details, because if it's a buddy comedy to me, if it's more like Tommy Boy or more like Dumb and Dumber, then I mean, I don't see how it's not a small rewrite, because the way that this works is they're not buddies. That's the whole point. The one is a legit stalker, and a serial stalker at that. As you come to learn over the course of the movie, it's like, and so the evilness and the real threat that the Jim Carrey character. I mean, what are we gonna call him? Chip? We'll call him Chip.
We never hear his name in the movie.
That's what I mean. So for the purposes of the conversation, I guess we'll refer to him as Chip. But he is legit threatening, and he gets more so as time goes on. I mean, at the beginning, some of it seems a little funny because it's Jim Carrey and he makes you smile. But of course, if you think about it in anything closely to an objective sense, if the cable guy broke into your apartment and brought stuff in there, like a lot of this stuff that is just huge crimes, scary stuff. There's a point later on in the movie where he viciously attacks and beats somebody.
Yeah.
And it's
Owen
like
Wilson.
It's like real. This guy is not just creepy. He's scary.
He's manic. I have to say that it's a film for its time, because watching it now with a child, it's like, he's never going to know what it's like to have to sit at home and wait for the cable guy to show up. And then I remember hearing the rumors of like, no, if you tip them like $200, if you slip them, they'll give you the internet, or they'll give you like
a lot higher rates in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I hear $200.
Called the black box. And
this was the time that going to a hotel, their big plug was like free HBO at the hotel. But now it's like you go to any hotel and it's standard. But
I don't know.
Yeah, not only that, but multiple HBOs.
Yeah.
It's not the same now that it used to be, but it's not wildly different, because now it's like, I can get you a password for HBO Go.
That would be actually, that's a close thing. I had the same thought as you, Hudacs. I think from a standpoint of like a cable guy, I've had satellite for almost 10 years. The guy has been out one time, and it's because a branch had overgrown from a tree and was like slapping the dish, and he came and chopped a piece of the branch off. That's it. Like, I don't know what technical school you need to go to learn that, but he came and fixed it. And I was thinking, because we never, like, I wasn't old enough during cable where I would have totally tried that now. Like, if I was this age in the 90s when that was a thing, I would totally try to slip the cable guy $50 to get all channels. And I remember, let me know if you guys remember this, but if you ever, when you first got cable back in the day, for our younger listeners, when they would as soon as they would start your service, there was like a 24 to 48 hour window where you would have every single channel. And eventually, over 24 to 48 hours, it would correct itself and it would shut off like the Playboy channel, the Cinemax. So you had all this stuff that you shouldn't be watching. And so you would know if you were getting new cable, you were like going to record movies off HBO and Cinemax and all these movie channels because you're probably just going to have regular standard cable packages after 24 to 48 hours.
It was one of those casual crimes that even if it wasn't as many people who did it, a lot of people on like TV shows would do it. You know, there's a whole Seinfeld episode about the exact thing, about the stolen cable thing. It was a bit of a trope in the 90s for that like brief moment in time, like after cable was a thing and before, you know, people just did, you know, there was a brief moment where it was kind of like in the old sitcoms. There was always joke about like somebody trying to make a flan in an oven, and like you know, don't make a lot of noise because you'll make the flan collapse. And it was like that joke did not stay on TV. But for like a minute, there were like a bunch of
like someone's flan.
Not enough flan jokes out there these days.
So in the 90s, there were jokes about stealing cable, and like the whole inciting incident of this story is that, and hopefully, I think kids can still understand, even though they don't, they still know what it means. So like, by the way, in case you didn't realize, we're gonna spoil the whole movie. So Jim Carrey's character shows up when the Matthew Broderick's character has just moved in, and he's been waiting for the cable guy all day, and the cable guy was hours and hours late. Finally, Jim Carrey shows up and then, you know, installs the cable. He's ridiculously weird. He's already encroaching. He's already knows what his last address is and the name of the person that lived there. So he's already giving you mad signals that he's a total creep. But he does hook up the cable. And so there's a really cool aspect because he's legitimized by the fact that he was waiting for a cable guy. One showed up and properly installed cable. As you find much, much later in the story, he doesn't work for the cable company and hasn't for years because he keeps getting fired because he stalks residents. And I'm kind of like, wow, that's kind of insane. How do you know? But anyway, what happened to the original cable guy who was supposed to show up to his apartment?
I don't think. Go ahead, Hudacs.
Oh no, I always assumed that he phone tapped him. That like he's looking for places that like he's probably, if he's stalking around, he probably knows that apartment is available and is just kind of waiting till someone moves in, knowing that when you first move in, what do? You call, you start all your services. So you're gonna call the cable.
Matthew Broderick's pissed that the cable guy hasn't showed up, and like he still doesn't have his couch in place yet, but he needs that TV. And he
yeah, it's I just always assumed that he like ran into the guy and been like, "Hey, no, I got it."
Just sent to us, yeah. They just
walked out of it and then shows up, you know, hours later, kind of a thing. That's what I always assumed.
But did you have to assume because they just kind
of because it's never said.
Take care of them.
It's possible that there was a scene in there about that. I know a lot of stuff was cut from this movie that they shot. Yeah, I don't know what happened to the cable guy, but this strikes me more like you mentioned. He it's incredibly creepy, and it's told in a comedic way, which makes it a comedy. But this is like borderline Talented Mr. Ripley level, you know, as far as like taking identity and like trying to get into this guy's life. I mean, it's closer to the Talented Mr. Ripley than it is Dumb and Dumber. You know, you do have the slapstick comedy aspect, but from a story perspective, you know, if that stuff's played straight, you have much closer to like a Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah, I definitely felt like this really treads the line of horror, like to the point of, you know, he goes over to her, Matthew Broderick's ex's place, and he's like, "Cable guy, I didn't order anything. It's a special package. You know, I didn't order it." it's from someone special. And then it's like, oh, is it Steven? Oh, okay. Yes, come into my house. And it's like, I could almost hear the people in the theater be like, don't open that door.
But the way you would shoot that is, instead the way that scene is shot is it's basically a single on Jim Carrey's character in the hallway, and we hear her through the door like, no, it wasn't me, I didn't order that. If it's a horror movie, we're inside the apartment with her listening to him through the door.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what kind of takes away the release of the horror of it, is you really do get, you follow Jim Carrey's character around. You learn his backstory of
there's even a flashback of him as a kid.
So I feel like that kind of, it almost humanizes him as to like why he is the way that he is.
Well, if you wanted to make this a movie about a stalker and have it be a straight thriller drama, you could take that same idea. You know, you could make, because it's actually, I think that's probably the thing that's the funniest of all, is Jim Carrey's characterization is unrealistic. You've never met anybody who was like that. But the plot is not unrealistic. Wouldn't you guys agree? Like, this could happen this way, largely. He didn't do anything that was like an impossible crime, you know. He didn't really do anything that nobody has ever done before, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, like if you were to remake it today, yeah, it could be whatever the person is installing the internet into the apartment, you know, giving you the internet box. Or it could be the UPS driver or the Amazon Prime or the Uber or Lyft guy that's, you know, picking you up and just like starting casual conversation. Before you know it, you've agreed to hang out with him the next day. And that I always found that interesting, is that every time the cable guy wants to hang out with Matt Broderick, it's tomorrow. What are you doing tomorrow? Let's do it tomorrow. And I like it because it gives it that like tight kind of just like, okay, you're gone, you're out of it, it's gone, and then it's like, oh wait, no, tomorrow I have to see him. Okay.
I remember one time in my own life meeting a stranger, having beers, you know, and I was like alone in a new city, and this crazy son of a like started calling me immediately, and asking me for favors and pretending like we're old friends, and I was like, no man, I'm busy, and then years later call me up and do a Jim Carrey like, hey,
Just taking a whiz. Thought I heard the phone ring. Call me. We'll talk.
You know who this is, and I was like these people actually they're out there.
So, but you guys are, well, they're out there. But one thing you guys didn't touch on, you're talking about things that people come to your house. Like a lot of stuff now is done remotely. What about like catfishing and the people that are online and like dating apps? These are all people that like you know do some level of vetting, I suppose. But like
you could go online and figure out if somebody's dating, and they'll be like, you know, and then start talking to them like, oh, I'm a friend of Nick's.
Yeah. It would almost be easier, you know, and then because you can find out so much about people online now. I mean, what'd you have before that? Like the yellow pages you could go through, and like maybe you have access to public records, but now you can go through most people and figure out whatever it is you want to know. To, you know, if that was the case. Like I definitely think you could do a remake of this now and just add the technology. I don't even think it has to go to the house to get in there.
Yeah, there's plenty of good stalker stories out there. One of the things that's kind of nice about this one is that nice in the sense that it's interesting and unique is that there's nothing directly romantic about what the stalker is, why they're attracted to the person they're stalking. You know, it's not for sex or anything even close to it. It's different, and so that kind of makes it a slightly different take. And it also, you know, if you write the story and it's not Matthew Broderick that's playing it, but it's Leslie Mann, then she, just being a woman, would automatically be 1,000 times more suspicious,
right,
and be less likely to just sort of feel bad after, you know, and for saying something suspicious or rude, and then thus going along like, sure, I guess I'll go with you out to medieval time. But because it's a man and a man, then it's different.
Right.
And so some of the things that get the ball rolling before it gets out of hand are more believable, because you see Matthew Broderick go like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult you. Yeah, I guess sure, I can go have a beer. You know?
Yeah. It's a totally different movie if Leslie Mann is the one getting stalked.
Probably a lot less funny, because he'd be like, no. Do you think it's interesting how they made character of Chip, Jim Carrey's character, how they tried real hard to make him sympathetic?
Yeah, with the childhood scenes.
That one was a big one.
Yeah. By the way, the mom of that scene played by Kathy Griffin.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I ever knew that before.
Face. You don't see her face.
You don't really see her face.
It's a lot of characters. It's a lot of people from the Ben Stiller show that, like Andy Dick is in.
The cameos are outrageous. Jack Black, George Siegel.
Yeah.
You know, Ben Stiller himself is in the movie.
Yeah. There's a Kyle Gass cameo at the very end.
Yeah.
David Cross is in it.
Yeah.
For a hot second. Yeah. Yeah. But I think they tried. I think they wanted you to. They didn't want you to hate Chip, and that's part of the reason why you're like, if you're looking at the script, you might think I have to cast somebody like a Farley or a Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Likable. I definitely think that there is a real sand trap that you can run into where it's. You have to be likable and believable that, you know, the cable guy would come and throw a giant party and then hire a prostitute, and then you would hang out like you're having breakfast in the morning with this guy that you literally met 3 days ago. And that you would like, it's that subtle, it's a very, very subtle, beautifully done line of like getting creepy enough, but not creepy enough that it's like, no, I have to report you to the police. So it is a very it is such.
And eventually, there's a really nice turn.
You don't realize it.
Well, eventually, it's a really nice turn because, like anybody would, you're going to hit a breaking point, and Matthew Broderick's character does hit a breaking point, but this creep has built himself up a nice little set of insurance. So where now he's like, oh, you want to play bad? He says, I could either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And now he starts blackmailing him and all kinds of, like that prostitute he bought for him. And it's like, there's like a photo of him that he takes real quick. And it's like, oh, why did he take that? You know, you're not supposed to even really think about it later on. But of course, you know, it comes back. Him getting in where he is getting in with the man's family. And talking to the family about how he's concerned with them, playing family. And I'm like, this is how psychos in relationships do it. They get in with your family and then turn your family against you. And it's like, geez. Or they make you hate them. You know, you have to split up. They have to split you off. You know, they go, oh, this is like, it was kind of chilling to watch some of the tactics he was using because they were too close to reality.
You've never played Porno Password before? With the family.
Oh, every time I say password, I do it. The password is.
Yeah.
It's Cards Against Humanity.
Oh,
yeah.
Would you want to play that with your mom?
I would not. So I want to talk about the medieval times scene.
The whole
you guys
of the movie
medieval times
go on for like 20 minutes.
Yeah. But I didn't realize, like, we're watching, I haven't seen it in a while, how quickly we get to medieval times. I always thought that was down the road in the movie, but
I always thought that, I agree with you, Nick. I always thought that was down the road, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, we're in medieval times. I was like, I thought we were at the halfway point, but it was way earlier than that.
Yeah.
Wait, have you guys been to a medieval times?
No.
I went to time.
Really? Oh man, it's such an awesome thing. And so prior to this, I guess it had never really appeared in a movie in a comedic sense, medieval times. But like, what a brilliant we talk about it all the time. Like, it's one thing to have like, oh, let's have them go to dinner. It's like, that's, maybe they'll go to Joe's Crab Shack. Like, okay, yeah, that's Joe's Crab Shack funny. You know what's funnier than Joe's Crab Shack? Medieval times. And not only that, this guy hooks up one of the knights with cable, so they're going to fight at medieval times. Like, that's awesome.
That sequence, that whole set piece, it looked like they must have been shooting for 13 days at medieval times. They were there for so long. And they, like you said, Nick says this is a thing that doesn't normally happen. I love that Andy Dick is like the leader, the ringmaster. Yeah. Got Janine Garofalo as like the super awesome 90s surly waitress who just hates her job.
They don't have utensils, but they have Pepsi.
They didn't have utensils in medieval times, so we don't have utensils at medieval times.
So I think I saw they shot for at least a week there, or it was. I know it was a couple long days at least. But Matthew Broderick is allergic to horses.
Get out of here! Really?
Yeah. So he was having problems with that, and then
wow.
One thing we haven't talked about this as far as Jim Carrey playing this character. There is a ton of improvisation that was not in the original script, and that's just what you get with Jim Carrey. Like the whole Silence of the Lambs thing, that scene, which is like one of the most memorable scenes in that movie, and one of Jim Carrey's most memorable. Completely improvised on like the third take.
Yeah, it does look like Broderick's really laughing.
He's cracking when it's over the shoulder, over Broderick's shoulder. You can see the side of his face, and he's trying to hold it in.
That's a real style, yeah.
Yeah, because he's just, it's got to be impossible not to just start dying.
I also forgot how long just his Silence of the Lambs impression goes on for. I thought he just said, "This is Silence of the Lambs." I didn't realize he went.
It sounds like a 45-second joke. It's like a significant portion of the movie.
Yeah,
by him putting chicken skin on his face and saying "Silence of the Lambs."
And it's funny to think too. There are so many. I don't know if I guess you would have to call them Easter eggs. I mean, they're pretty blatant references, so maybe they're not as hidden, but. There are, at every sentence almost that Chip says, whether it's his name or something he says or a reference, it's some reference to some TV or movie thing. Like, it's all the time in this.
And that's for his character, but it's great for the character when you cast an actor like Carey, who then will be ready to just spit out references whenever he wants. And it's like, as long as it's a reference, it's not the same as like showing a picture or something like that or trying to copy. Right. So he could say however many he wants, and he says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just like quips he gets in there, like keeps changing his name to TV characters.
Yeah,
they're all over the place. I can't imagine. Like I was trying to, because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, this is in the mid '90s, so like we were kids when this came out.
Yeah,
there was a ton I didn't get then. There's a ton I don't get now when it's all these old TV show references from back in the day. Like I might have seen some of these shows on like Nick at Night. Other than that, I don't have a frame reference for a lot of the. I know half the stuff. I'm like over my head.
Yeah, I love it. I love when I'm watching a Jim Carrey movie, especially some of the older ones, and you can tell because there'll be bloopers for these. Yeah. There's a lot of great bloopers for like Liar Liar and all the rest.
That's the first one I thought it was Liar Liar.
Where it's like it's a moment but it's a totally different punchline because he just says a different one every time, and everyone who's on set has to try to like just play it. And so watching these movies, it's fun because it's like, that must be like the one that they left in. Like the very thing, the first time he walks into the apartment, he's like, "Oh, the old Simpson place. I guess it looks like they did a pretty good job cleaning it up. Why? What happened here? They had a lot of cats." And I'm like, he probably said a different thing every single time.
Yeah.
So, it's funny. I was just, as soon as you said that, I was thinking, so this came out in 96, being shot in 95. There's another storyline going on about this murder. So it's two twin brothers, former child actors, both played by Ben Stiller. And so, like, the underline of this...
Is that actually in the opening montage with all the real shows?
Yeah.
Little quick clip of Ben Stiller on
just slid in there, which is great. But it's how, at the time, this would have been the year after the OJ trial. Right, so like everyone.
Menendez brothers, is that?
What's that?
When was the Menendez brothers?
And I think it might have been before too. So it feels like a bit of a combination.
Okay.
But a big trial that everybody's watching on TV.
Look, I was 12 during the O.J. Simpson trial, and I can tell you, I watched way too much O.J. Simpson trial as a 12-year-old. Imagine what the adults are watching. So I think, we were talking last week. We did Demolition Man. It was like very influenced by the L.A. riots to open the movie. This through line, everyone's going like, man, yeah. I can only imagine that people are seeing this through line going like, wow, yeah, I spent a significant amount of my time watching this trial. Like, and I have no idea why. I might have just gotten dumber over the past year for watching this murder trial.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely. I thought the same thing, but you might not think it if you were younger than we are and you didn't realize, you didn't live through the 90s, you might not realize it. But it's like, it's not supposed to be veiled. When you're watching this in the theaters in 96, you're not supposed to think of anything besides. It's directly commenting on our obsession with the celebrity trial and specifically OJ. And I love it. Quoting Jerry Springer. This is like, but it's not, to me, even though Jerry Springer and the OJ trial are obviously dated, they're like 90s things, that doesn't bother me. I don't think that this movie suffers from its references being too old. There was the occasional weird one. I think Matthew Broderick refers to himself as a Felix Unger, and I'm like, okay, that one's getting a little old now. I don't think people necessarily know who Felix Unger is.
I still don't know who Felix Unger is. It sounds like your flan joke.
The name of one of the two dudes in The Odd Couple. Exactly, right. So, but most of it, I think, is pretty fun. I think people mostly still understand the concept of a celebrity trial. They know Jerry Springer, and like, if he makes a Waterworld reference and then he goes, Kevin Costner, Waterworld, it's like, yeah, that's fine. Although you might not get, unless you're people like us, where he immediately goes, I don't know what the fuss was about. I saw that movie 10 times. It rules.
It's one of the most accurate things said in that entire movie. Waterworld does rule. You know what rules? Thanks to our sponsor, Universal Studios, the Waterworld stage play.
Yeah, this movie's okay.
So, talk about flops. This was one of the things that made this a really big deal is that Jim Carrey, so this is Columbia Pictures, they offered Jim Carrey. I mentioned earlier, Chris Farley, $3 million they offered. Jim Carrey made $20 million for this movie, which like set a new precedent and the budget was $47 million. So almost half the budget went to Jim Carrey specifically. And so
3 big hits,
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it made money. I mean, and it definitely made money. But you know what happens a lot, and it's hard to figure out when, but smear campaigns are a real thing in Hollywood. It's something that studios do. So evidently, at backlash for Columbia paying Jim Carrey that much money, the other studios started a smear campaign, which is because when you watch it, it became a cult classic. What's that?
Against the movie, like
against the movie,
something. Yeah,
that was their way of getting back for offering that kind of money and really like raising the stakes and what everyone else was going to have to pay for, A-list talent in the mid-90s.
I get it. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. That feels like you could dive into that and probably get 12 different stories saying 12 different things about what was true about that. But it's like it doesn't surprise any of us. It wouldn't surprise you.
No, it's a real thing that happens. It's hard, I think it happens more often than not. But I mean, the studios are so competitive. I mean, every dollar counts, right? So if you can get more people to go to your movie one weekend, as opposed to the second weekend for another movie, like you'll take that box out. You need every way you can get it. But I thought I would actually be interested to see, it's like you mentioned, it's hard to find out where these are because there's not like a paper trail typically. There was the Sony hack years ago where he got all those emails from everyone, but we know this kind of shit happens for sure.
So one of the things that I kind of dug about the movie was the way it was structured. So about 15 minutes in, we get this speech where he takes him to the giant dish, the big dish that sets up that it's like, well, this is what delivers cable to everyone. And he gives him a speech. And it's actually, I was like, how long ago was this movie? Because in 1996, he was saying things that are definitely true. He's like, pretty soon you'll be able to do this and you'll do that, talking about basically the reality of modern internet. And then the last line is, you'll be able to play Mortal Kombat with your friend in Vietnam. That wasn't really true at all, not really, in 1996. And then it's obviously normal now to do it all the time. And I was like, that's cool. That happens 15 minutes in, which is great structurally because that's where our conclusion's going to be. And I just love that it's actually a whole hour into a 90-minute movie before we get Matthew Broderick's character looking Jim Carrey's character in the face and saying, I don't want to be your friend. And we've got a nice, good half-hour chunk left for this creepy guy to get legit threatening and legit scary. Because I was thinking to myself, you know, when he does some of this crazy stuff at the end, is it possible that it's, how well set up is it? And then I thought, no, I watched him beat the snot out of Owen Wilson, a stranger in a bathroom, and leave him, like, what, knocked out? Like, incapacitated on the floor of that bathroom, you know? And that happens before, obviously Matthew Broderick doesn't know that he's done that. Yeah. But the audience knows that. And so when we watch our main character tell him the last thing on earth, this scary guy that he wants to hear, we're now scared for our main character because we know how threatening he really is.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely built up. Now, when it gets to the end, was there a disappointment that Jim Carrey's character wasn't dead? That you, like, could or couldn't you kill off the cable guy?
Yeah, to me that speaks to what Nick just said about how this entire movie is spent on Jim Carrey as being the biggest star in Hollywood. They're giving him the biggest check, you know, of any whatever comedy star. That sounds to me like some producer said, you can't kill him. You know?
Yeah. I think it was originally written where he was supposed to be impaled. In the original Judd Apatow script, I know it said that he was impaled by the dish. And then it's obviously a reveal in the version that we see. I would guess, and I can't. Unfortunately, not all the information we want is available. But I would guess that they shot an alternate ending to this. But there's no way the studio's like, yeah, we paid this guy $20 million. He is going to live, because had more financial success at the box office, which it did okay. It wasn't a flop, but had it had more financial success, to go, great, we're going to bring him back. Like, you even have the scene at the end with the paramedic in the helicopter. It's like, hey, you're going to be all right, buddy. It's like, are you really my buddy? Like, it sets up for a sequel.
As if it was going to be a sequel or something. Yeah.
And like, look, don't rule out that there won't be a Cable Guy sequel in
that's
the
kind of what's funny, is that, like, Matthew Broderick's not on the poster. You know, it's Jim Carrey. It's his movie. And so, you know, I guess, and because, like we had said about building up, you know, sympathy for him, and at the end he's doing this weird sacrificial thing about why he purposely jumps to his death. Nobody like kills him. He tries to jump to his death. He says he's going to do this because he's going to try to take out the cable box because there's too many people out there ignoring each other and ignoring their kids because of the TV. Which makes the movie very meta. At one point, very self-aware. At one point in that exchange, he's yelling, like, this is a great place for an ending. And Matthew Broderick's character is like, an ending to what? This isn't a movie. This is, you know, I always love when a character shouts in a movie, this isn't a movie.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's doing it on purpose.
I think that idea is still relatable. The idea of, like, no, you're not living in a movie. This is reality. I think that is still relatable to audiences, especially younger kids, of like, oh, this isn't TV. This isn't what movies are like, you know?
And the way the line has only gotten blurrier since, with reality TV and people vlogging from their homes and doing YouTube channels and stuff, where it's like, it's hard to tell, like, what is the difference anymore?
Yeah. When am I not, you know, playing a character? I would argue, I think, would you find Matthew Broderick, I don't think he's very likable in this. I would actually, if I'm the cable guy stalking someone to be my buddy, I'd much rather hang out with Jack Black's character in this than Matthew Broderick's. I mean, Matthew Broderick just kind of boring, and there's like nothing spectacular about him at all. Like, I don't see the draw of why he's the guy. You know, like, what makes this guy cool?
I agree with you on that. Like, there's nothing about Matthew Broderick that really, like, you warm to him. It's more just like you sympathetically feel bad because he got stuck with a crazy cable guy. You know, he picked
Yeah.
the wrong line at the grocery store to go to, and you just feel bad for the guy. But I think what it plays more to is the fake like happiness or openness of like, hey, maybe we'll do that someday, buddy. Like, hey, pal, and the idea of being like, somebody called me buddy. Somebody was like, hey, friend, what are you up to? Like, do you have a minute to talk? And somebody being so drawn into that of like, you've said it, so we're friends now. That's how friends happen. I think that is more is also why I think Matthew Broderick not being like a very likable person, and why you would go with someone who's more like totally. If it was what's his Owen Wilson? If it was Owen Wilson that called the cable guy, and it's like, oh, he seems like a much cooler guy than Matthew
He's a
Broderick.
caricature of a jerk.
Yeah.
All Owen Wilson says, he has like 10 lines, and they're all mean, like weird, and where he's pretending to care about what she thinks, but he's still interrupting her, and he's yelling at the help. Like, that's his whole character, but for no good reason, other than to maybe contrast him with the Matthew Broderick character, who's clearly just a nice guy. But in the end, it wouldn't matter if that guy was a jerk or anybody else. Jim Carrey was going to go kick his ass anyway.
Right.
So it was like, I thought that was kind of funny that when I thought after the scene was over, I was like, so Owen Wilson was a total like dick for why? You know, because it was, I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe to just help Leslie Mann's character later on think like she should be with the Matthew Broderick type.
Yeah.
But they just made him boring. I agree with you, Nick. They didn't give Broderick more to do. It's not like he can't do it. He's been more interesting characters in plenty of other things. This one was just kind of, he was very two-dimensional. He had like standard job.
Yeah.
And he had like standard desires, and he was just in love with like a nice person, but you didn't talk about like why. I just like this person. And their relationship, there wasn't like a specific reason why they were broken up. You know, it wasn't like he did something wrong or she did something wrong or there was some kind of weird disconnect. I wanted to move to, Seattle for my job and she wouldn't go. There was nothing like that. They were just like, maybe we need some time. So it's like, maybe just in the filmmaking, they didn't bother trying to make the secondary characters. They just didn't all that deep. It was like, this is Jim Carrey showing off for 90 minutes.
And maybe it's because Jim Carrey's such a big name, and I do think we feel for him a little more, because even though he kicks Owen Wilson's ass for being they've made Owen Wilson a jerk. They purposely didn't make him some nice guy whose ass he kicks, because that's going to make.
I'm not even mad he's kicking his ass because you just watched him be a jerk.
Yeah, and I think he's so Broderick's character's like so bland. You're catching yourself trying to figure out like what do I want to happen with this situation? Like, do I want the cable guy to be his friend? Like I know he's kind of a jerk, but this other guy kind of sucks too.
But I like thinking about the other roles that Matthew Broderick has played, like Godzilla, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like he's
the producers.
The producers. He does just kind of play the same one-note character.
No, come on, Ferris Bueller is nothing like the guy he plays in The Producers.
Yeah, kind of.
No, he's not.
Sounds like another podcast you guys could get.
No, he's not. Matthew Broderick is more talented. They just didn't write his character very.
It is very weird that Matthew Broderick isn't on the cover. That it is very much like this is the Jim Carrey show. He's the one that the movie's pivoted around, that the money's going to, that in fact we're going to change the script and not kill him at the end of it, because we could do a sequel with him. And I would argue to say that like Matthew Broderick is just as big of a name, but he just doesn't bring anything to it.
Yeah, and but I blame the character more than I blame Broderick. I mean, think of that basketball scene, and I know we were talking like, well, I don't know if this is like more of a creepy, more of a dark comedy. You know, show me that basketball scene, that 7 minutes of Jim Carrey just doing his Jim Carrey shtick. It's like he's like a character on a sketch show where he's just overdoing everything. He's overdoing the clothes, overdoing the mouth guard, overdoing the trash talk, overdoing the way he stretches. Jumping off of Jack Black's back and breaking the backboard. Like everything is just. It's just, let's send Jim out there to be as silly as possible because it's funny watching somebody run around normal people at a YMCA acting like a total crazy son of a... And so that's like mostly the movie. So if you like Jim Carrey, then you like this movie, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just him doing this awesome thing that he did in many different times in the 90s.
It's definitely an energetic Jim Carrey movie that he really just kind of goes at.
But his character is more threatening than Ace Ventura is than the dude in the mask. He's more threatening than the guy in Liar Liar. He's actually
more of a crazy tone to it than anything else.
And that's the big difference. And other than that, I really enjoyed it. I like what we do on Film Flashback, watching movies made at a different time. The music in this movie is not the same as what you get now. There's some good 90s hits in there with like some Rob Zombie stuff and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's also the score. They don't do scores like this. This big orchestral score, they just play them differently. Film music changed between 1996 and now. You just do music a little bit different. But I watch movies like this, and I remember, like, oh, wow, they used to do scores this way. They were a little bit more John Williams-y, and that kind of, and it was like, okay, cool. I liked it. It was kind of like, if eating comfort food or something I hadn't had in many years. Oh, this is my mom's thing that she used to make me when I was sick. Listen to the old orchestral stuff that they used to do in the 90s, and I'm like, yeah, feels good to dip into this pool again. I'm really stoked you watched it. You guys have any final thoughts on the Cable Guy?
No, I forgot how great it really is, and every time I see it, I'm just pleased.
You're a Jim Carrey guy.
I am very much a Jim Carrey guy. So this is one of his repertoire films that I would watch and then would go and imitate. I don't know how many times I sang. Don't you want somebody to love? And
yeah.
or you're doing the basketball scenes. You're like, I don't want to pull a hammy.
Don't pull a hammy. Yeah. It's stuff you still say today.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Where did I get that from? And you kind of, like, same with Dumb and Dumber. You've said it so many times that you just can't even remember where you got it from. I will say one more quick fun fact because we're talking about the basketball scene. Jim Carrey, not actually a basketball player. Couldn't even dribble basketball. So they had to use CGI.
Diving for the ball and stuff that doesn't require actual skills.
Exactly. A lot of traveling. I thought that was a great rewatch. I mean, that's peak Jim Carrey, man.
You know, a character is really acting himself off the screen when Jack Black he looks normal and calm and reasoned.
Yeah.
He swamps Jack. Well, this is great. I love that we chose this. And so you'll be able to check this out, obviously, on all of our normal podcast platforms, on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. And that'll be available. This is a live stream, but it'll be available in the morning. And as we do, you can find all of our Handlebar TV stuff at Handlebar TV's YouTube channel. Just search for Handlebar TV. Thanks, Nick, again. And thank you, Matt, for joining us once again.
Thank you guys for having me. I love it.
Yeah, we'd love to having you. Okay, we'll see you next time on Film Flashback.